Hi everyone, I'm really excited. Thanks for having me on the Prep Advisor platform. Before I just want to apologize, I have a cold. I'm sorry. I have here my cup of tea, my box of tissues. So if you hear me sneeze, I'm sorry about that. Today I want to speak about how to get into a top 10 MBA program. I'm actually going to split my presentation into two. Let's call part one the beginners and part two the more advanced. In part one, I'm just going to discuss some basic things. Why do a top 10 MBA? What would it require? What are schools looking for? How much does it cost? Some differences between the programs, salaries, things like that. So some basics. If you'll still stay with me, I will actually go through some more advanced things in the second part of the presentation. For example, how to tweak your CV or how to write an essay. So if that is too advanced for you, feel free to fall asleep in that part or not off. But let's start with the presentation. So just a bit about myself. My name is Shimri Winters. I'm a London Business School graduate. Before London Business School, I was in university and I did my undergraduate in computer science. Then I worked as 2-3 years as a programmer. And then I went to London Business School for my MBA. When I finished my MBA, I went to consulting for 2 years. And then I worked at big IT companies as a business manager or business development manager, or various roles in this kind of area. And I've been now 5 years at ARINGO full time. This is what we do. One other thing is when I left London Business School, I was asked to be on the interviewing committee, and I was interviewing tens of candidates each year to the program. So that's just a bit about myself. Wow, a really bit about ARINGO, because I really want to get into the presentation. We're a boutique MBA admissions consulting firm. We've been going on for 15 years. We work with a couple hundred people each year. We're really good. Our stats are verified by EY. Now let's get into the presentation. So I really tried to answer today everything I could think of. So there's lots of WH questions, but why do an MBA? Who are the schools looking for? What does it require from me? Timelines, how to apply, what do you need to apply? So I hope I answer all these questions. As Ina said, we'll try and make the presentation kind of short to leave you some room for questions at the end. You can also type them as we go along and I'll address them all at the end. So first of all, why do a top 10 MBA? I think the first reason, and when I look at ARINGO candidates, the problems we see the most are career switchers. So we see lawyers and accountants and programmers who would like to do something else in their lives, in their professional lives. For example, we see lots of computer programmers who would like to move to business development roles. We see lawyers who are working today in very interesting things, but on the law side, on the legal side of big deals, and they would like to be on the business side of the deals. So that would be one profile that a lot of people want to go and do an MBA for, to do a career switch. The second one is accelerator. Okay, you work in a bank, you really like working in a bank, you want to continue working in the bank, but you also would like to progress, and you would like to have an advantage over your peers. And I was giving a lecture last week at Ernst & Young, and we actually brought someone that we worked with a few years ago from Ernst & Young, from EY. And he gave the example there that at EY, every year you get promoted, and they've only taught me about 20 times the different names of the levels there. But there's like analyst, senior analyst, manager, senior manager, project manager, senior project manager, something like that. I'm sure I got that wrong, but don't tell anyone. And what this guy did, he was 3 years at EY, then he went to Emory for a 1-year MBA, and then he returned to EY, and he actually returned in a position that would have taken him 7 years to get to, and he did it in 4 years. So that's an accelerator. If you want to get some kind of advantage over your peers, but you want to go back to the same kind of industry that you're at. A third type of people that talk to us a lot and that apply to MBAs are future entrepreneurs. Now, this isn't the only way to open your dream startup. If you have an idea and you know what you want to do, just go and do it. But if you don't have a specific idea and you don't know how to raise money and you don't know how to read balance sheets and you don't have a credible name, etc., an MBA, and you might not even have the idea right now or an international network, an MBA might be a great way to give you a lot of confidence and credibility for your future entrepreneurship ideas. I put here another arrow, this academia one. If you know that you want to work in a business school as a lecturer or in some kind of other university, an MBA isn't the classic way to there, because usually MBAs don't have a thesis and it's hard afterwards to do the PhD. But yes, people do go to business schools sometimes because they're thinking ahead and they want a great brand in their resume to then go and work in academia. This is an option as well for a top MBA. This is where I'm just sipping from my tea, sorry. Great, sorry. I might sip a few times throughout the presentation. Okay, so let's just, I keep mentioning top 10 MBA. What is this? So I'll let you in a little secret. There's more than 10 top 10 MBAs. The reason is there's more than one ranking, okay? And there's a few rankings. Each ranking will tell you they're the most important ranking, etc. But there's quite a few rankings. There's the Financial Times, there's US News, there's Bloomberg, there's The Economist. There's quite a few, there's actually a few others as well. And if you kind of ramp up all the rankings, you will see that in the US, there's probably 15 top 10 MBAs. And in Europe, there's about 8 or 9 top 10 MBAs. So again, sorry for the math calculation, but that's just how it is. We'll go soon through these brands and try and explain how you choose where to apply to. But I just wanted you to notice these brands, and I'm sure most of you know these brands. And I sometimes like to refer to my mom. My mom knows these brands, right? Because Stanford, they're good at everything. They're good at law, they're good at business, they're good at medicine. Harvard, they're good at everything as well. So these brands are usually universities that have existed between 100 to 200 years. They're very good at most subjects. And guess what? They're very good MBA programs. This is a bit different in Europe. In Europe, the MBA programs tend to be very small. So the schools tend to be around the MBA programs. For example, if I look at London Business School or INSEAD, they have a few other very minor degrees like Master in Management or Master in Finance, but mostly INSEAD teaches MBAs, mostly London Business School teaches MBAs, and the rest of the business schools in Europe, I would say kind of the same. Yes, there's also Oxford and Cambridge, who they might have the big university name like in the US schools as well. And soon, I think in 2 slides, I will talk a bit about the differences between European schools and US schools. There are also some special programs. I'm not going to discuss them in this presentation. I just wanted to say that if some of the attendants on this webinar are very young, perhaps still in their undergraduate studies or just finishing their undergraduate studies, there's a bit of a trend right now for deferred programs. So Harvard started it with something called 2+2. That means you can actually register while you're still in your undergraduate studies, and then go and work for 2 years before you actually do the MBA. And some other programs like Stanford, Tuck, Yale, Oxford offer also some of these deferred programs. There are, of course, some other special programs like dual degrees. Kellogg have a very interesting program. MIT have an interesting program. Harvard has an interesting program. But again, I won't be able to go into these because they're very specific. So why do a top 10 MBA? Okay, so we know all the programs, we know the great brands, but why should I go and do a top 10 MBA? The reasons are, first of all, there's great salaries at the end of the degree. I don't like speaking too much about the money, but I will show you afterwards the average salaries. They're very high, 6 digits, both in Europe and the US. It's a very good career switching opportunity. So like we said before, if you're a lawyer, even if you work in a great firm and you accompany M&A transactions, mergers and acquisitions, you're doing it from the legal side and not from the business side. You're not the one that is running these business transactions, you're accompanying them. And this would be a career switch that possibly you're looking for. And it would be very hard to do this career switch without an MBA. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible, and an MBA isn't an answer to any of these statements. You can also make a 6-digit salary without an MBA, but this would definitely be a very standard way to do it, and acceptable way to do a career switch to make a good salary. Obviously, international experience, if right now you're living in Europe or you're living in Asia, and you go and you study 2 years in the US and possibly work afterwards in the US as well, this gives you an international experience. Opens doors. So even if you have a visa to go and work in another country, let's say you live in Europe and you have a visa to go and work in the US. So you get to New York and you say, hello, I'm here. Again, it's quite tough to go and find a job in another country with no experience there. If you go and do an MBA, it gets quite easy because a lot of the recruiters come to the business school to recruit. And I'll give you some examples of that later. And one last thing, it's great. I don't want to go into my experience too much at the London Business School because I might start crying. It's a lot of fun. You really make friends forever. It's very, very interesting. It's amazing how many things you don't know right now, and how many industries you don't know, and how many competencies you don't know. And you just broaden your horizons tremendously. It's just a great, great experience, and I really recommend it to anyone who can do it. So this is a new slide I literally added it today because I always get a question. So I'm really debating, should I go to Spain or should I go to the US or should I go to England? Like a lot of people debate between Europe and the US. So a few of the differences, the first differences or the first two differences are the ones I mentioned before. The US schools tend to be very famous brands in everything. And like I said, my mom will know all of them. And my mom might not know INSEAD, who's actually ranked above most of the US schools. So is that something important for you, this famous brand? Well, the US usually has those. There's a lot of advantages in going to a small school. And again, I'm just giving the London Business School as an example, with 550 students a year versus NYU's 20,000 students a year. So there's a lot of differences in the school, and you can imagine that there's a lot of interaction with the professors. It's always a small community. There's a lot of events. You kind of know everyone at the end of the year or 2 years. So there's advantages and disadvantages for big and small schools, and usually you will see that in the US versus Europe. Another thing is in the US schools, there's usually between 60 to 70% Americans in the program itself. In the European schools, there's usually 90% foreigners. That means at NCI or HEC Paris, there will hardly be any French people. It's a very, very international community versus Harvard, where there will be 70% of the students from the US. Two other things, in Europe, most of the programs, except 3, are 1 year long. This means that your return on investment will be quicker. If you go and do a 1-year MBA, you're out of the job market for 1 year, so you're not making a salary for 1 year. But after 1 year, you're back and you're making quite a high salary versus the US where you're 2 years not working. So obviously the return on investment will be quicker in a 1-year MBA. And one last thing, it's usually just demand and supply. There are advantages going to Europe because it's also a bit easier to get into the programs. And to get into the 3rd or 4th best program in Europe is much easier than to get into the 10th or 11th program in the US. Why? Supply and demand. Okay, so some programs in the US, although they might be 10th, 11th, or 12th ranked in the US, still have a huge demand and might get up to 10,000 applications a year versus the European schools who get something like 4,000 applications a year. So it's just a huge difference. There are similar opportunities in both with very similar employers at the end of the MBA program. So I'll actually show you a bit about that as well. How do you choose? Well, I would say there's 2 things you want to think about. The first thing is location, location, location. Where do you want to live? These are 2 years of your life, and I'll actually take it longer. Usually, you will find an employer from the same geography. So there's lots of exceptionals, but if we make it black or white, let's just say for the sake of this discussion, that if you go and study in Europe, you will find an employer in Europe. This means that you're going to study a year or a year and a half in Europe, plus you're going to want to work at least 2 or 3 years in a very good employer before you return to your home country, perhaps. And this is a, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years adventure in Europe. And if you go and study in the US, you'll have the same thing in the US. So again, it's not black and white, but most candidates, it just works this way. And if you really want to live in New York and really want to study in New York and work afterwards in New York, I genuinely suggest you go and study in the 4th best place in New York, or even in the 8th best place in New York, and not in the best MBA program in Europe. So that is that's the location-wise. Yes, there are school specialities, not that many these days. So if I take INSEAD, for example, it used to be a lot around strategy and consulting. Not anymore. They're really into entrepreneurship. They're into marketing. London Business School used to, London finance. They love entrepreneurship. They love technology. I would say that all schools have a bit of everything. Nevertheless, there are certain recruiters that come and recruit from more schools than others. For example, Apple recruited from Duke last year. A lot of MBAs, well, Tim Cook is from Duke, so that makes sense. Same thing with Microsoft going to recruit at Chicago, because Microsoft's CEO is from Chicago MBA. But generally speaking, yes, you can do a bit of research on the school and then see which recruiters came to recruit MBAs from that specific school. I'm not underestimating ranking. This is also something important. Obviously, you want to go to a school which has the highest reputation possible. So ranking is important too. I put here some other factors like class size, teaching methods. Although I have to admit, most schools use a case study method, and a lot of the professors actually move from school to school. So when I say, try and choose the school based on teaching methods or certain professors, it's actually cheating a bit, because all schools have, well, most schools have everything. So they will have marketing, they will have finance, they will have entrepreneurship, they will have technology, they will have strategy. And things like the location of the school, I think, are probably the most important factor here. So again, remember, this is the basic side of the presentation. We will move into a more advanced presentation soon. When do you apply? So for candidates who are thinking of September 2020, the first round of application tends to be in September 19, so a year before. And applications may take 3, 4, 5 months to work on. So you would have to start working on your applications around May, so in half a year. Soon I'll show you what you need for the applications, but let's just talk about the GMAT. There's something called the GMAT. This is quite a big exam. It might take 2, 3, 4 months to prepare for this test. So if you are thinking of September 2020, I think you really need to get a move on, especially with the GMAT and a bit of school research. And again, I will move into some more slides to show what you can do. It really costs a lot. This is a huge investment. And in the US, with the 2-year programs, again, the tuition can be $100,000 to $120,000. Add to this cost of living, etc. It could easily be $200,000 if you're going with a spouse, or a bit less if you're going by yourself. Luckily, there are a lot of scholarships. The first type of scholarship I want to discuss is merit-based. Merit means excellence. And the way to get a merit-based scholarship is just to have an outstanding application. Okay, so the schools would love to see, soon we'll talk about the factors, but some kind of outstanding application. It doesn't have to be a high GMAT or a high GPA, it just needs to be something special. And if you have that something special, the school will really want to offer you some kind of scholarship. And this year, now, there's a few schools that we have answers from. For example, Oxford, we applied with 4 applicants in round 1, 4 of them got in, so all good. 2 of them got an offer for merit scholarship. One was £15,000, one was £30,000. These people didn't have a high GMAT, didn't have a high GPA, they just had a very interesting story. The second type of scholarship or financial aid is on the financial need basis. Harvard and Stanford mostly work in this way. They don't have merit scholarships because they say everybody is excellent here. After you get in and you tell them how great you are, then they will look to see if you need financial aid, and then you can tell them you're great, but actually you don't have any money, and hopefully you will get some kind of financial aid from them. These scholarships I discussed are very school specific. That means the merit scholarship, like the Oxford example I gave you, is specific for Oxford. The financial aid example I gave you is specific for Harvard. There's also some general scholarships, and Chevening is a British Council scholarship. Just go into the British Council website of your country and you will see some information on that. Fulbright is something quite similar in through American Consulate or Education USA, which is also an American education foundation that helps international candidates go and study in the US. So there are some international general scholarships, not many. And to be frank, your best bet is just to have a very good application and try and get a scholarship from the actual school that you're applying to. Naturally, there will be a lot of questions on this, and again, you can start typing some questions and I will answer them at the end of the presentation. Right, so I'm going to pause a sec and let you look at some of these logos. Okay, these are, I just downloaded this from London Business School. These are the campus recruiters that came last year to recruit on campus. So again, the MBA students didn't need to open some kind of website and start sending their CVs. These recruiters came on campus and each of them had 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 positions. There were more recruiters and positions, okay, there were about 300 recruiters, but some of them had multiple positions, than the number of students at London Business School. Meaning you will find a job. So I always show this slide and ask, is there a company you wouldn't want to work in one of these companies? And you know, a lot of times I get, Burger King, who would want to work there? So the Burger King position was actually one of the most amazing positions. Some of these companies don't recruit to a specific position. They recruit to something called Management Rotation Program. And at Burger King, they were recruiting for this specific program. It doesn't mean that you flip burgers one time and then you work at the cashier another time, no. It means that half a year you work at Burger King Finance, then another half a year you work at Burger King Strategy, then another half a year you work at Burger King Marketing. And after a year and a half or 2 years, you sit with your managers and decide in which department at Burger King, by the way, and in which location, would you like to work long term? This is an amazing opportunity. And a lot of the companies have these general management positions. For example, General Electric, American Express will have this kind of position. Shell will have this kind of position. And some other companies will have very specific positions. For example, McKinsey or BCG will have very specific consulting positions. Salaries, I promised to show you the salaries. So salaries are rising all the time. Currently, the salaries are around $150,000 to $160,000 a year in the US programs. You will see there's quite a big jump after 3 years. This is from 2 reasons. The first reason is there is in some of the companies I showed you before, kind of an up or out attitude. That means if you're not good, we're just going to kick you out. If you're good, we're going to give you a big salary increase. The second reason is I did take this information from 2 different sources, so I'm suspecting they weren't synchronized, but still, this does give you a good feel of the salary levels in the US. Salary levels in Europe are very, very similar. Okay, this depends a lot on the euro, pound, dollar exchange rate, but because the employer is very similar, the salaries tend to be very similar as well. Okay, so what are the schools looking for? Well, the first thing they're looking for is someone smart. Smart can come in many, many ways, but they just want to see that you've done intellectual things, you had an interesting degree, you're working in an interesting place, and you're dependable. Dependable means, doesn't matter what position you're doing, you have some kind of ownership about something. Your boss, he will give you some kind of project and he trusts you on that project. It's very, very important for the schools to see. Obviously, they are looking for academic excellence. Some schools more than others. Cornell is a very good example for a school that in every interview, they kind of question your academic ability. They just want to make sure that you can actually complete the MBA, because let's not forget, we saw the salaries. This is an academic degree. Vision, the schools are very interested in what you want to do. Why do you want this degree and what do you want to do at the end of the degree? They will look for a connection between what you've done in the past, your undergraduate degree, your professional experience, your extracurriculum, and what you want to do in the future. And this is really key for them. We'll discuss this again in some of the next slides. Schools really, really want to see that you're interested in those schools. So if you're working on 5 applications, you cannot copy and paste those applications. You really have to do research on every school and make sure to tick the right boxes for each school, to mention the right professors, to mention your research on that school. Schools are very interested in that, and if they will feel that this particular school is a backup, they won't give you acceptance. Leadership or leadership potential. So not everybody manages 10 people, that's fine. Show the school some kind of leadership potential. This is very important for the school. They're thinking about how can they find the next CEO. And if you don't have any leadership experience or haven't shown any leadership potential, that might be a worry for them. I put here / entrepreneurship potential as well, because if your life ambition is to be an entrepreneur, but you've been working for 8 years as an accountant, that's suspicious. But if you've tried 2 entrepreneurship projects, even if you failed on both, that does show that you have this certain flair and that you want the MBA and you might need the MBA to understand how to do it properly. International exposure is also something very important for the schools. Remember that I showed you that in the European schools, 90% of the people are foreigners. And if you've only worked in one country with your nationality, that might be a worry for the school, because they want to make sure that you can get along with anyone. And it's important to show them that you've worked with some international teams if possible. And last thing that I put here is broad horizons. MBA programs are very interested in your academics. They are very interested in your professional experience, but that just isn't enough. They're looking for round people, for interesting people, and they would like to see people that have hobbies, that volunteer, that ran a marathon, that like to cook, that you have other interests apart from your academics and your professional experience. So, what will you need to apply? Just sipping from my tea, thank you for that. It really does take 2, 3, sometimes even 4 months to work on an application. You will need a CV, and my next slide is going to talk about the CV. You will need 1 to 8 essays, so NCAD are probably the longest MBA application with 8 essays. SOP is statement of purpose, some schools ask for that, it's just another name for an essay. You'll need 2 recommendations, you'll need a GMAT score. If English isn't your first language or you didn't study your undergraduate in English, you'll need to take some kind of TOEFL or IELTS exam. There's some online application stuff. What I'm trying to say, this takes a long time. Don't wait till the last minute. This can take 2 or 3 months or sometimes 4 months to create good and quality applications. So just work in advance. Right, so that was the first part, and hopefully basics about why to do an MBA and when to do them. What I will do, I will take now 7 to 10 minutes to go through 7 key points that I feel are important in every application. Now again, this is a bit advanced. You decide if you want to take from this stuff or not. I'm just going to try and throw out some things. I'm going to talk quickly, throw out some ideas, some thoughts, and some advice. Hope it helps you. So first of all is the CV. This is the most important document when you send an MBA, your application, MBA school, MBA program, your application, they will look at your CV. This is the first thing they'll look at. And it's very, very, very different than your current job-seeking CV. I used to be a programmer, and I'm assuming my CV said know C++, I know how to program in Java, and I've written lots of code. Okay, for my MBA CV, you can throw all that away and just say, managed 2 people, worked on a project worth $5 million. So straight away, I'm stating my achievements, and I'm not stating what I actually did in my job, because the MBA admission committees have to compare lawyers to accountants, to programmers, to bankers. And to actually explain what you do at work is good, but then they can't compare a banker to a lawyer. But if you show that you manage people, if you show that you have international experience, if you show that you have some kind of impressive accomplishment, and I hope you can see the big, bold accomplishments, that's what the MBA programs will be really interested in. One other thing is, if your company isn't a famous company, if it's not Google or Coca-Cola or Barclays Bank, explain what the company does. That is important. That does set the frame to now understand what you're doing within that company. So that's a bit about the MBA CV. Second thing, every business school will ask you, what are your short-term, long-term career goals? How do you find these goals? So I don't want to be too misty, but close your eyes. Imagine where you really would like to be in 10 or 20 years. It can be very ambitious. It can be the CEO of Google. It can be, I want to open a healthcare company to help Africa. It can be anything that, you know, it can be a politician. It can be head of an NGO. It can be venture capital fund. You decide where your dream, what your real dream is. Now, what I do suggest doing is writing that on a piece of paper, closing your eyes again, and imagining another path. So thinking about another dream. Okay, maybe I won't have a venture capital fund, but maybe I'll just be the head of an NGO and help causes that I believe in. So those are 2 dreams that I can see myself do in the future. Now, what we need to do is connect your past, your academics, your professional experience, your MBA future studies, your post-MBA first position, and this long-term dream. Now, that's what business schools will look for. If your dream is to open a restaurant, that's great. But if you've been working as an accountant for the last 8 years, that might be a problem. If you were a waiter and you were promoted to shift manager, and now you want an MBA to then go and operate a restaurant and then open your own restaurant, that makes sense. There's a nice connection, and that's what schools are looking for. If you learned computer science and you were a programmer, and then you were a team manager, now you want an MBA to move to business development roles in big IT companies, that makes sense. So you're gonna have to find a career goal that you can connect your past, your MBA, and your post-MBA job to get into that goal. But still, be ambitious, okay? Because MBAs, remember, they're looking for the next CEO. They're looking for ambitious candidates. Networking. You must remember, a few slides ago, I mentioned that schools really want to see that you've done research on them. They don't want to see copy and paste. They really want to check that you really, really want to come to that school. The way to do it is a lot of school research. Yes, you can just read online in the school pages. They all have great websites, but it's much better just to speak to people. The way to do it is look on your LinkedIn, find people that know people, go to events, contact club members. If you're interested in social impact, every school will have a social impact club. You might be able to find online the social impact student who's like the ambassador of that club and is prepared to go on a call with you for half an hour and answer your questions. If you can do campus visits, this is also important, and it can add a point or 2 to your application. It's also great fun. Just coordinate these visits in advance. All schools allow this. You can go and see the schools, you can actually sit in some classes. MBA fairs are also a very good opportunity to go to one place, usually in your hometown, and meet 20, 30, 40 representatives from one school, sorry, from different schools, obviously, in one place in 3 hours. So don't be lazy. It's very important to show the schools that you've done research, and you really want to mention in your applications this research. You want to say, after speaking to Shimri Winters, MBA 2005, he suggested I go to Professor Koster-Markides and sit in his class, innovation management. Okay, it should be that kind of level of research on each school. So tip number 4 out of 7 on how to create the best application you can. So every MBA has essays, like we said. NCAD have 8, London Business School have 2, Harvard have 1, MIT have 1. So it's really difficult in these 1 or 2 essay schools to stand out. What we suggest is not just sitting and writing the essay, but strategizing before. Okay, what do I want to convey to the school? What do I want to tell them? Maybe I want to tell them that I advanced in my career really fast. Maybe I want to tell them about my extracurriculum special volunteering position. Maybe I want to tell them about my parents. Maybe I want to tell them about sports. So strategize first. What do you want to convey to the schools? Then after you strategize that, you can write some kind of draft. Just make sure you're answering the question. You'll be surprised how many times I've seen an essay which looked great but just didn't answer the question. By the way, usually this is a copy and paste essay from another school. So just be very careful when you copy and paste essays. Make them school specific. One last thing, I put here one of the Hass's value. Hass is Berkeley. Confidence with humility. Yes, I think everybody can understand that. Don't try and stand out in a way that saying, I'm better than everybody else, I did things better, naturally I'm smarter. No. MBAs want you to be humble, but they want to see great achievements. My fifth tip will be about the recommendations. Most schools will require 2 recommendations. Some schools, like Michigan, Ross, and Cambridge, only require 1 recommender. First thing is, they prefer to see professional recommendations. This means non-academic recommendations. This is very different than any other degree. If some of you are considering a different degree, other degrees usually require an academic recommender. MBA programs prefer professional recommenders. Second thing is the recommenders need to know you. So a lot of people ask me, should I bring my boss who really knows me well, or my boss's boss who has a very good title? He might be the CEO or he might be head of something, but then he knows me less good. The simple answer is I would actually prefer both. I would prefer the boss's boss that knows you very well, but it has to be someone who knows you. It has to be someone who knows you and can tell the school with a great example how you stand out. So the best tip I can give you for a recommendation is if the recommendation says, I know John Smith, I manage 5 people, John is the best out of the 5 because ABCD. Okay, so if your recommender can say that you were the best out of a certain peers group, that's the best because it shows that you, compared with your peers, are a bit better or did something more special. So 2 more tips and then we'll obviously leave room for questions. Extracurriculum. So you remember I told you that schools don't just look for academics and professional experience. They're looking for round candidates, interesting candidates. And when I used to interview for London Business School, I used to look for one criteria only. Would I like this person to be in my class as a classmate? Would he add value to me? You can't just see this in academics. Wow, he has a great GPA or a great GMAT. And in professional experience, wow, he progressed quicker than his peers. No. Do you have hobbies? Are you an interesting person? Now, don't go and volunteer now in an animal shelter just for the sake of the matter. But think, if you have interesting hobbies, that's fine. Do you like dancing? Do you like cooking? Do you like traveling? Do you like playing sports? Have you ever arranged a football game? Do you volunteer somewhere? Be passionate about what you do. Don't just invent something. And then show it in the MBA applications. And my last tip is online presence. So we actually applied with 10 applicants a few weeks ago to Harvard Business School. 8 received an interview, so great, we have great statistics. But what's funny is 6 out of them contacted me and said, listen, I just saw in my LinkedIn, someone from Harvard Business School looked at your profile, okay? Just because they receive your application, don't think they won't Google your name. So first of all, Google your own name and see what you see online. Second thing is, don't write on your CV something completely different than it's written on your LinkedIn, okay? So if your CV shows that you're at Ernst & Young, you've done 4 promotions, and your LinkedIn profile shows that you work in Coca-Cola, that's a huge issue. So it has to all be correlated. Yes, Facebook or other social networks might be a good place to, for private stuff, and it's okay to have funny pictures and funny comments. Still, Google yourself, make sure that it looks semi-professional in the places it needs to look professional. So those were a few tips, probably more advanced tips for applicants. That's the end of my presentation. I hope I managed to add a bit of value to some of you. By the way, feel free to send me your CV for profile assessment. I always like helping. You can check out our website. We also have a chances calculator on the website where you can key in a lot of information, your employer, number of years, etc., and kind of get a grade that can give you some kind of feel. Are you a good candidate, or are you still missing something? That's it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Back to you, Ina.
All right, so candidates have started sending in their questions, and they are showing up on the question pane, on the question button.
Okay, so I can see some of the questions. So thank you. Maria, you're my number 1 right now in the audience, because you actually asked me 2 questions, so that's great. So first question is, are there any statistics of demand in MBA graduates? So I don't have any statistics on that. I can tell you that there's lots of demand for MBA graduates, especially if you go to top 10 schools. Yes, there's a lot of talk, what's going to happen right now, are there going to be any changes, visa changes for international applicants? Right now, there haven't been any changes. There's still a lot of demand for MBA graduates, both in the US and in Europe. And all I can say about this is just keep going to top schools, and you will be fine. There might be a little shift in some of the employers. So it does make sense that in the UK, post-Brexit, there will be less finance jobs. But still, there'll be a lot of international recruits coming to from a place like London Business School or Oxford or Cambridge. So I wouldn't be too worried about that, Marie. Another question is, great, lots of questions. I like this. Good. How can I impress someone from admissions? Okay, and what's the best way to meet someone from admissions? This is a very difficult question. The way to the way to meet someone from admissions is difficult, because it changes. But school visits are great, but obviously you can't always go to the US and visit 10 schools and go to Europe and visit 10 schools. So one of the best ways are different online fairs, and fairs that come to your hometown or home city. So there's a few international organizations, for example, Access MBA is a big international organization who comes both to Europe, Asia, Middle East, US, and brings with them a lot of schools that you can meet officials from the schools. Another way is, like I mentioned before, you can just research and you can find a club in the school that is very related to what you're looking for. For example, high-tech club, startup club, social impact club, consulting club, private equity club, and then you can find students in that club that will be happy to answer your questions. How can you make a great impact on them? Just tell them your story and that you're really keen to go to this MBA program. They'll do the rest. Scholarships. Well, scholarships is an issue. And again, the best way that I can suggest to approach scholarships is, I know it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but most applicants, again, 50% of the applicants we worked with last year received some kind of scholarship. I have to admit, we also had an applicant receiving $7,000. So that is nice to have, but it might not be enough. But some applicants, I think we had 14 applicants last year who received a full ride, full tuition plus a bit of money and the scholarship. And the way they received these scholarships was they just had a very interesting application. Can you combine scholarships? It's a tough question. If you get scholarship which is outside of the school, obviously you can combine that together with a school scholarship. But usually most applicants will receive something from the school itself. Let me give you another tip. Again, it's a bit advanced. If you get into more than one school and you get a scholarship from one school, you might be able to negotiate with the second school about that scholarship. So again, another tip about approaching scholarships is apply to as many, if this is something important to you, apply to as many schools as possible. This will obviously maximize your chances both of acceptance and of a scholarship, but might also give you a bit of leverage to negotiate with the school scholarships. Now, I know this sounds off topic. I'm actually now at the stage where we're negotiating with several schools scholarships for our candidates, but it's not poker. They all received some kind of scholarship in school number one, and we went to school number two and said, well, actually, we would love to come, but school number one offered us, X amount of dollars or euros. Can we, could you match that or could you help? Internships. Okay, so this is something I didn't mention, so that's important. Most two-year MBA programs have an internship between the first year and the second year. This is a big advantage to the US schools. This is important. You don't need to know about this too much in advance. After 2 months of your first year MBA, the recruiters for the internships will come to campus and discuss this with you. This is a fantastic opportunity, both for you to see, well, actually, do I want to work in consulting? Let's just work 10 weeks at McKinsey and see how it goes. And for the recruiter to test you for 10 weeks and only then offer you a full-time job. So I love internships. I think it's great. And I think a school that offers internships is a great advantage versus a school that doesn't offer internships. But again, it's not a must. And a lot of schools that don't offer an internship, well, at the end of the MBA, you just go and work your full-time with an employer. So all good as well. Maria, again, good question. How long should the CV be? Many schools will actually tell you 1 page. The schools that tell you how long it should be 1 page. Even if you have 10 years of experience and you've worked at 7 employers, 1 page only. Very easy. So someone asked me, why did I choose LBS? Well, to be honest, I just wanted to be in London. I didn't see a huge difference between London Business School, NCAD, and some of the schools in America. I really, really wanted to live in London a couple of years. I went there with my partner. She wanted to live in London a couple of years. And we knew that we would also live there during our degree and also after our degree, and both of us also found jobs afterwards. My experience was amazing. Lots of clubs, friends, professional things that I learned. I still use a lot of my professional network from my London Business School education. I actually recently used it. I wanted to do a project in Thailand, and I just reached out some London Business School's alumni there, and they helped me. They, helped me network there, so that was great. Linda, you're starting to be one of my favorites. Lots of questions. I like that. LinkedIn recommendations. I don't really care about that. So it's good. It's always good to have a rich LinkedIn profile. But again, this doesn't count as points or not points in your MBA application. So I'm less concerned about that. I just want your LinkedIn profile to be completely coordinated and correlated to your CV and MBA application. Guys, I'm really running through everything, okay? I hope I'm not going too fast. MIT Sloan Fellows. This is a program for senior executives. I didn't discuss this. Again, I think you have my email. If someone has more than 12 years of experience, shoot me an email. I'll give you some more information about full-time and part-time programs. This presentation was mainly for full-time MBAs, which usually have 3 to 8 years of experience. Generally speaking, just to answer your question, there aren't many scholarships in the senior MBA and senior MBA programs like Sloan Fellows, like Stanford MSX. Less scholarships in these programs. How can you contact current students from schools? Well, I think I discussed that. Go to MBA fairs, LinkedIn, and find the club ambassadors. Every school has a club ambassador, and you can find students. They will all answer your questions. Wow, lots of questions. How much time does it take to come up with a perfect business school application? Usually when applicants work with us, we usually take 1 month for one school. I know that sounds a lot. Again, part of our ARINGO process is like working with 7 different people on your application, and it takes time. It takes time to think what we want to write. It takes time to write it in the best way. Yes, the 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th school will take less. The number of schools really depends on how competitive you are to the schools. So some people will apply to 2 schools, some people will apply to 8. I would say that the first school can take a good few weeks. The second school will probably take less and less and less and less because you already have a CV and you already have some, some of the information. Someone asked me about salaries in 7 or 8 years after the MBA. Well, that's a really tough question. Depends where you are. A lot of these places, the salaries grow very high, investment banking, consulting. A lot of MBAs go to entrepreneurship routes after 2 or 3 years. And again, it's very, very hard to judge salaries after 7 or 8 years. That's why most of the statistics will be 3 months after the MBA and 3 years after the MBA. Okay, someone asked, do I recommend to, this is a great question, Linda, do I recommend to talk to your boss before you apply? Well, most MBA, I would say about half of the MBA programs specifically tell you when you choose your recommenders, have you chosen your direct manager? If not, please explain. Now, there's a very easy explanation. If you're not choosing your direct manager, I'll be fired. I won't get the promotion. I won't get the bonus. He will hate me. So it's okay not to choose your direct manager. And in that case, it's okay probably not to tell your direct manager that you're applying to business school, a year in advance. Again, if you're okay with telling your direct manager, it's always I think, appreciated both by the schools and by him. And listen, if you apply to round 1 in September and you get in December and your school is starting in September, I mean, you're going to give your manager notice of like 8-9 months. So he's going to appreciate that a lot. So it really depends where you are right now, but yes, I do advise talking to your manager. Yes, there can be an awkward situation if then you don't get in, but this is something you can tell your manager. I'm trying to apply to some school. I might get in, I might not get in. I would like to use you as a recommender. Is this okay or not? Someone asked me, I'm not an interesting candidate. Is it a good strategy to be honest? Well, if you'll be honest and tell them you're not an interesting candidate, no, that's not a good strategy. I do think it's a good strategy to be honest. And I remember when I was an interviewer at London Business School, I interviewed an accountant. He was doing very boring stuff. He was doing audit and to a bank. And when I asked him, like, what's your biggest achievement? He said, well, I got the report out on time. Okay, that was a bit boring. But then when I asked him about his career goals, he told me his grandma has a real estate business, and he wants to move into the real estate business. Now, this guy was 30. He had 6 years of accounting experience. He didn't work 1 day of his life in real estate. It was obvious this isn't an honest answer. He knew that schools are looking for some kind of family business, real estate sounds sexy, and he just chose this, career story. This isn't good. So on one hand, yes, I want you to be interesting. On the other hand, yes, you're gonna have to be honest. So I'm not sure what non-interesting is maybe just wait 2 years and go and volunteer somewhere, find another job. It can be a job in a startup and doing interesting stuff. By the way, just a life thing, advice is go and do interesting stuff. If you work in a boring place, go and find another job. Yeah, easy said, I know. Okay, someone asked me about career progression. Does it have impact on admission? This is a very good question, and I see this a lot with lawyers. Okay, for example, they work 4 or 5 years in a firm, no advancement. Okay, they have the same position title, they don't manage anyone, they're doing the same thing for 4 or 5 years. Schools typically won't like this too much. They would love to see that every year or two you get some kind of promotion. But again, they do know that there's certain positions that you just can't be promoted. Either the firm's very small, or you just don't have that kind of career progression in that specific firm. What can you do? Just show that your responsibilities have changed, your projects have changed, the ownership of a certain thing has grown, that you get more and more responsibility from your managers. Maybe you don't manage anyone, but maybe you train newbies in the company. So just show what you can. Okay, that's a bit about that. Rounds. Okay, is there a big disadvantage in applying in round 2? So if you remember, there's round 1 in September, round 2 usually in January. Some of the European schools have a few more rounds. Some of the US schools like NYU and Cornell also have 1 or 2 other rounds. Generally speaking, round 1 and round 2 are identical, and there isn't much difference. And again, if you want to apply this year, just apply in round 2 in January and you should be fine. Round 3 is different. If you're an international applicant, do not apply in the last round to schools. The chances are much lower. Chances for scholarships are very low, and the schools will question why you're applying so late. So I would strongly advise you not to apply in the last round. Round 1 or 2 are fine and kind of the same chances. There are different advantages to round 1. For example, if you are applying in round 1, you can apply to your dream schools. And if you don't get in, you can apply in round 2 to your backup schools. But if you're applying to round 1, you can't, if you're applying in round 2, there's no backup. But if you don't get in, you don't get in. So then I would advise just to apply to a few other universities as well. So just to apply to a few more universities in round 2. Great question from Radia, which is, how can I address a possible weakness? Okay, for example, a low GMAT score. So I love this question. We love low GMAT scores. By the way, my GMAT, 640. How did I get into London Business School with 640 when the average is 705? Well, just write a kick-ass application. You have to be interesting for the school. If the school will see that you're an interesting applicant, they will be okay with you being below average. Now again, there is a certain threshold. I would just say kind of a number guess is if you're 50 points or lower below the school average, that's already too low. So for example, the top 5 or 6 schools in the US, the average is 730. If you have a GMAT below 680, don't apply to Columbia. But if you have 690, you just need to show that you excelled everywhere else, you have a great professional experience, you have a great extracurriculum hobby, you volunteer, you've done a lot, you were just a bit busy when you did the GMAT because you have a great profession and you're working 150% of your time, and that should be fine. We've had lots and lots of people with low GMATs get into top schools. So again, I'm less worried about that. I'm worried that the application, I would be more worried how you show a, outstanding application. Wow. Someone asked me, what's the, Carolina, I'm not sure, I'm actually taking off a point. This is a tough question. I'm joking. What is the most important skill that the school would like to see on the CV? And then you said, well, accept leadership and entrepreneurship, etc. I don't think there is one. But schools would like to see, remember that slide I showed before about the different things they would like to see? They would like to see progression. So if you had some promotions, they would like to see achievements, quantifiable achievements with dollars, with percentages, with numbers, led 3 people. They would like to see international interaction. Now, even if you've only worked all your life in Poland and you work at Deloitte, but it's okay to say worked with teams from the UK, France, and the US. So that's international experience. That's very important for them. They would like to see some kind of progress from an internship to an analyst to a consultant, or in whatever experience and profession that you work in. So there's quite a few things they would like to see there. I think I mentioned some of them. International applicants, all fine. Like I said, as long as you don't apply in the last round, you should be absolutely fine. Okay, just round 1, round 2, even in round 3 or round 4 in European schools, as long as you don't apply in the last round, you should be fine. Low GPA, like I said in the low GMAT, the GPA is just one aspect of your application. By the way, GPA is probably 10 to 15% of your application. It's not the most important factor, where the GMAT can be about 30% of your application. So a low GPA, no problem, Angie, as long as you can have a high GMAT or very, very good application to counter that. So I'm not too worried about that. If it's an exceptional low GPA or exceptional low GMAT, I would address that in the application. And in a lot of online applications, so not in the essays, but actually when you register to the schools, they will ask you, does your academic GPA or have your academic abilities in the past represented your academic ability? And then you can just say, no, I really believe I could have done much better, but in university I was worried about finding a job afterwards, volunteering and having a good time. Again, as long as you can explain it, that's fine. I had a question about non-top 50 schools, okay, or non-top ranked schools. So for example, should I go to a school that's ranked 50? Well, first of all, there's a lot of great schools, and especially in the US, also a few others in Europe that I didn't mention. And yes, these schools might still get you to the same career that you want. So you might still go and work at Amazon as a product manager after going to a, let's call it a third tier school that's ranked 30 or 40 or 50. These schools are still very expensive. So why should you go to this school? Well, first of all, if your GMAT doesn't pass a certain threshold, for example, if your GMAT is 600, just won't be enough for a top 10 school. Second of all, if you only have 2 years of experience, you might want to go to one of these schools, not one of the top schools, but go maybe to a lower ranked school. Third thing is you might get a scholarship in these schools, and naturally when you go to a lower ranked school and you have a good application, you have a higher chance of a scholarship. So this is something you need to take into consideration. It's hard for me to answer yes or no, should you go to a non-top 10 school. I do believe in rank, but I would go in ranking, I would go to the best school possible for you, but sometimes you just can't, not everybody can apply to Harvard, and you might need to go to another school. Someone asked me about the Master in Management program. These are new programs developed for career entry level candidates, usually with up to 2 years experience. I recommend these programs. They're great programs, only for candidates who have 0 to 2 years of experience. If you already have 2 years and no GMAT or something like that, and you're only going to apply next year, so you already have 3 years, just go for the MBA program. They're good programs, these Master in Management programs, because once you study at London Business School or INSEAD or any other place, you have the full platform of the school, and you can interact with students, you can interact with employers, and you can utilize the schools for that. So yeah, I do recommend Master in Management programs as well, only for very young candidates. So I'm going to answer last 3 questions. I see we're short in time. What's the first document schools see? Definitely your CV. That's the most important document. This explains who you are today, what you've been doing till now. And again, refer to my how to write a good CV slide. It has to be full of accomplishments, no picture is needed, very standard template of CV. You can download CV from our website or any other website. And schools will actually glance through that very quickly to try and understand who you are as a person, what you've done till now. So Carolina, you really asked an advanced question. Do the schools do research on my recommenders? It's a very good question. The answer is no. So when you apply to business school, you give them 2 recommenders. Schools usually do not do any research on recommenders. To be completely honest, they hardly do any verification on you as well. So you can kind of tell the school whatever story you want to tell, kind of. I don't suggest this because I think things will be discovered, for example, in your interview. So most schools have an interview stage. What does happen is after you get accepted to these schools, a lot of them will have a verification process stage. So this is after you get accepted to the school. Some of the schools use a third-party company that does a verification process. They can approach your recommenders. They can check your profile online. They can ring your HR manager at your company to make sure that you really worked at Coca-Cola for 8 months and your position is analyst. So again, I do suggest to be as honest as you can regarding these things, because it will be very embarrassing if you get into a school and then there's a verification process. Okay, extracurriculum activities. So what extracurriculum activities can someone add in an application? That's a great question. And again, it doesn't have to be 7 years volunteering in an animal shelter. It can be anything else. Love to travel, love to cook. I love to run on the beach. I love to host my friends on Wednesday night. I've arranged something at work, which is like a social event once a month. Okay, it's very important to mention something. Again, it has to be real, so you can't really invent something. But everyone is interested in something. So even if you sit at home and read fictional books, great, mention that. If you read comics, if you like to draw, if you like to dance, if you like to sing in the shower, mention these things because they will be interesting to the MBA programs to read. Thanks for having me, guys. Feel free, you have my email, feel free to shoot me an email with a CV if possible, as that's the most important document. And I enjoyed sharing my knowledge with you guys. Good luck to everyone. Bye for now.